Welcome to the Moon Collective Sanctuary. I'm Dr. Lydia Luna, and I invite you to join me on a journey of self-discovery, healing, and transformation as we explore the depths of our inner and outer world to unlock our truest potential. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Moon Collective Sanctuary podcast. I am Dr. Lydia Luna, a clinical psychologist with over 15 years of experience, and I'm the founder of the Moon Collective Sanctuary Wellness Company. And today we're going to discuss trauma through the holistic lens. And I'm so excited to have Briana Perlson here to join me and talk about this.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. I'd love for the audience to get to know you. So do you mind sharing what brought you to trauma work and taking the holistic approach to your work?
Absolutely. It was years of my own struggle with therapy and finding that, wow, I've done so much work and I've talked so much and I've just attended sessions. I went first at 17 years old was when I first went into therapy. And it was just this process of, okay, I know what the problem is. I know how to fix it. I have this CBT lens. I'm challenging negative beliefs. I'm working through the past. I'm changing the narrative. And yet I don't feel better. I don't feel it in my body. Right. I'm carrying something still. Maybe I still even, at some points there's still flashbacks. There's still something wrong. And at that point, it was just working through with therapists. It was like they didn't know what to do. It was like, well, you're doing everything. You do the homework. You're showing up. We've talked about it. We logically know what's happening, and yet there's something there. So that's when it was a huge pivotal shift of, okay, there's something else out there, and what is it? And this was back when trauma was not talked about it the way it is. So it's amazing now. I mean, trauma and therapy is so well known. It's common. It's acceptable to even admit it that, yes, I have it, or I've gone through it, or I'm attending therapy. And so it's a very different ballgame now. But then it was just this whole, no one talked about it or knew about it.
True. And it took, I think, what a special spirit to figure out, okay, what else is there out there? Because this isn't working. Oftentimes we can victimize ourselves and be like, okay, I'm just not going to get well. This is my reality. This is my truth. But you took the initiative to seek more. And I think that's what's special about life, right? It's like once you start seeking, things show up for you, right? So how beautiful that you had that mentality or that drive. Yes. And look at now, it evolved and it flourished into a profession, right?
Absolutely. It's so easy to stay stuck in your reality. And it's really hard to change. And to also look within of what's my part in this? What's my role? And finding that, wait, I do have control and I do have power.
Wow. Well, I think it's a good kind of segue to talk about what is it that you do in your therapeutic work. EMDR is something that I know you do. You also do Reiki and yoga. So how do you address trauma through these modalities?
Absolutely. So the lens I really look at everyone coming in is what's showing up in the present and what happened in the past to impact your current symptomology, how you show up, what are your resourcing around you of your internal skills? Do you even feel safe in your body? And so from that lens is really coming in on just understanding, and then how do we change that and how do we heal? Sometimes we process it. Sometimes we move from EMDR on the therapy couch to, okay, we're going onto the yoga mat now and we're going to do some breath work or some movement, and then we'll go back to processing, or we'll pull in art therapy. And so it's fun for me in the sense of I really love helping people finding where do we need to start, where do we need to go, and then allowing the brain and body to take us there, and just really kind of that eclectic approach of really what is the person needing, and from there we find and we pivot.
And for those that, have a perspective about trauma and even maybe are not familiar with EMDR, can you share about what is trauma? I think there's different polarities, right? Some people think trauma has to be this singular major life event. Yeah. And then other people use that word all the time, oh my gosh, that was so traumatic. Right. So what is actually considered trauma? And then what is EMDR?
It's so true, because trauma is thrown around everywhere. And then it takes away the reality of people who've actually gone through it. Right. And what is it? So my favorite definition of it is that trauma is anything that is too much, too soon, too little, too long, or too much, too long. And so that way it really encompasses everyone's lived experience and different things. And so for some people, what a traumatic event turns into PTSD symptoms versus someone else might go through it. And because they have supportive family systems or they've done a lot of work themselves and they have a lot of internal resources, it doesn't affect them the same way it affects that other person. And so that's why the single event of what is trauma, we can't even define it always. It really depends on the person and what that experience was, and really more focusing on that lack of safety within of what it created.
That brings me to a thought about how that is interesting, right? Where several people can experience the same situation, but be affected differently and then respond to that differently. Yeah. So tell me about EMDR. For those that don't know, what does it stand for? How does it look? How does it work?
Yeah, so it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's been around for about 40 years now. There's a lot of research behind it, and essentially what it is we're doing alternate tapping on the body, or your eyes are moving back and forth following a light bar, or maybe it's alternate sounds. It's all of these things that activate the right and left brain of movement while we think of that distressing event. It can also be a negative core belief. It can be any type of memory or even sensation. It can be something in the body. So EMDR originally was founded for trauma, but what we found is it's effective for even anxiety, panic attack, phobias, addiction. It works great for kids and adults, which is really cool. And you can do a lot of also positive things with it. So really installing through this brain and body type of therapy of installing positive beliefs, helping with attachment between caregiver and child, different ways to also create resourcing. I can go on and on because I'm super passionate about EMDR. It's my favorite modality to really look at a person of what's their past, what happened, how are they showing up in the present, and really how's the brain responding to it? What's that memory network? And so we always know where we start with EMDR. We don't know where the brain will take us. And that's the really interesting part, is things that maybe you forgot about or you don't feel like were impactful. What we find is when we do this work, it's, wow, yeah, I didn't feel safe in that moment, or that situation when as a child really made me feel unworthy, and now I'm carrying it and I didn't realize it. So how do I release it?
Yeah. And so you're using this word resourcing. What does that mean?
Yeah, so that's helping create internal resourcing within. And there's a couple different techniques we do in EMDR. One of my favorite is the alternate tapping through the butterfly hug, or you can do it anywhere on your body. And you can do that at home, which is nice. So that's a take-home one of, you can do this type of technique, and you can create things like a calm, safe place. You can create protector figures. You can create a container to hold things. And so what we'll do is it's kind of like a guided imagery of, I'll be discussing and walking you through how to create these things that you can then use in your real life when you get a trigger, when a distressing event comes up. And so you'll say, okay, I'm going to put that in that container, in that box far away. Or maybe you're calling in your protector of your cat or Superman or whatever it might be in that moment as you're grounding and breathing. And so it's really helping you. We do this in session, but also we're doing it outside of it. So you can feel like, yes, I can navigate this distress. Because with EMDR too, once you start trauma work, a lot of times things can feel harder before they get better because we're activating it, we're bringing it up. It can kick up a lot of anger. And just really this unsettling feeling, which is totally a normal part of this process. And it's because it's moving through your body and we're really releasing it through this process. It takes time. It's hard.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people find overwhelming, right? This idea to do the work and have to feel, experience, talk about everything that we've worked so hard to push down or push away. So what would you tell somebody who's reluctant to even go there because of that fear of, I'm going to break down, I'm going to fall apart, I can't afford that? When I do talk about my feelings, it means I feel depressed and I can't get out of bed for a few days. So is there anything that we can share with them to offer some optimism or hope or relief?
Completely. It's starting really small too. And that's where the first few phases of EMDR is so focused on resourcing. And so if you're looking for a trauma therapist, you really want to find someone who's very familiar with the body, with the somatic skills. You need to learn the tools within of how do you cope? How do you even access these feelings and feel safe within? And so, there's different techniques. There's breath work, there's journaling, there's art therapy, there's yoga, there's movement, just going for a walk, even simple things, having a glass of water, making sure, you're taking care of your physical needs and your emotional needs. And I mean, the list goes on. And so it's really helping if you can start. The key is, can you just get to that session, find a therapist you connect with, or even start at the yoga studio or a breathwork teacher. Start to take on these coping skills, finding what feels good for you, and then just start very slow. And that's the thing, is we do that in the therapy room too, is because we know we're kicking up stuff. And so the way EMDR works is we're desensitizing these memories. So that way, when you think back on them, it's no longer kicking up any distress, and it can install then that positive belief of maybe it wasn't okay what happened, and I'm safe now, and I'm in control now.
What role does the body play in either storing or processing trauma? Because I'm hearing you say yoga, doing these things. So maybe we can talk about that. Like, what happens to the body when one experiences trauma, and then how does it affect?
Absolutely. The neurobiology of trauma is so interesting. And I think that's the thing we were missing all these years. But now, finally, we know that mind-body connection is crucial. You have to bring the body into treatment because that's where the trauma is stored. So when we think of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, that's where logically processing things, traditional talk therapies, cognitive behavioral therapies, even DBT to a degree, they access that part of the brain. So you're talking through it. The problem is when you go through a traumatic event or an adverse life event, then that part of the brain actually slows down because all the energy is going into the bottom part of the brain stem, and your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode kicks in. So you don't even have access to those parts during trauma, which is why trauma really lives not only in the body, but it's accessed through the nervous system and triggers through sound, sight, smells, really using the five senses that can trigger memories. And that's because it really is fragmented the way it's stored in the hippocampus because of the nature of the traumatic event.
How would you say that how would it feel for people if they're experiencing trauma in their body? In your experience, how has it manifested for people? Like, how does one even know that it's in the body?
Completely. I mean, a lot of times people who come in with anxiety and say, I don't know why I'm anxious, that's a lot of times when we start to go back, it was trauma, or it's something that happened where maybe you didn't feel safe, you didn't feel seen. And again, that part of trauma, of it can be a lot of emotional neglect. A lot of times people say, I had a great childhood. And maybe overall, your parents did the best they could with the tools they had. And at the same time, maybe they weren't able to meet all of your needs. Maybe it was emotional capacity they lack. Maybe mom or dad had mental health challenges. Yeah. Maybe there was substance abuse in the home or a divorce. So there's a lot of things, if you start to track back, there was something else going on there. And so we start to then understand the somatic symptoms of maybe anxiety, panic attacks, irritability, muscle tension, feeling on edge, feeling down, feeling fatigue, headaches, all of these different symptoms, autoimmune disorders, things that come from stress. If you start to track back, it's, maybe there's something else going on.
That's so true. Like, what I think about when people have autoimmune disorders, like, there's a lot of attention, of course, and there should be, to the physical part of it, right? Like, any allergies, any toxicity in the body, let's do all the physical exploration. But we often forget, what if it's psychological? I've heard that fibromyalgia is one of those illnesses that is heavily weighted on mental health and carrying stress in the body. And what happens is, like, it's the body turning on itself because of the heavy levels of stress and the toxins that then get released in the body when we have chronic stress. So I think it's so interesting. And we often do forget that when we're experiencing physical illnesses, yes, let's rule out any physical ailments, but also let's check in with our mind and to see if there's been anything that we've been holding on to. And people often think, well, that happened 20 years ago. I'm fine. Why would it affect me now? And I'm just curious, because I have something to say about that. But what would you say to somebody that, like, they experienced it a long time ago? They're fine overall. Why even deal with that now?
Well, I would ask, did you ever address it? Has it been something you've been carrying this whole time? And now it's finally showing up. And that's the thing. If you're not listening to your body, it's whispering through all these different little things. It's going to scream. And it's telling you, you need to pay attention to me. There's something going on and we need to address it.
And sometimes when I've encountered experiences of people saying, like, why is this affecting me now when it's been okay then? And what I believe this, that maybe they're ready now. There's something that's brought them to this awareness, realization, and it's affecting, like, it's having a negative impact now because it's time to address it. They're ready for the change. Maybe they're ready to process and deal with this, where before maybe there wasn't a possibility. Maybe they were on survival mode. Absolutely. And now life has gotten a little better and they think, well, that's when I should feel the least stress. But no, that's when our stuff sometimes comes up, when there is calm and peace, because now we can address whatever we've been holding on to.
Absolutely. It's finally safe enough to feel this. And the brain is to protect you. It will not allow you to access certain things until you're ready. Mm-hmm. And that's what's so interesting too with trauma work, and especially complex trauma, is we'll get to a certain point in therapy where we might take a break because they're feeling really good. They at a new baseline. And then maybe 6 months, a year, a couple years later, they come back just because something happened in their life that kicked up some stuff from the past, some residual stuff that now they're ready to face that part. And so it's layers. It's truly like that iceberg where sometimes we're only working with the tip of it. There's so much underneath.
Well, I want to segue into generational trauma. I think there's a better understanding now that this is actually something real and that we do carry generational trauma from our family, our ancestors. So maybe you can share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, completely. And it's been so proven now through epigenetics and how, trauma in one generation can change the neurobiology of yourself as you're born. And especially when we think of a mother, we know for sure the 3 generations, because when mom's carrying it in her womb, she not only has the baby, but she has the cells of the grandchild is there too. Mm-hmm. So you really have, even in that level of thinking of what does grandma go through, the stress or traumas that she's going through, that then her child is feeling, and then those cells that eventually develop into the grandchild.
How would you say that, either through your experience or what you know, generational trauma manifests in people's lives?
Yeah, there's this saying that it truly does get passed down until you can deal with it and release it. And so a lot of times too, people can come in thinking, I don't know why I have this heaviness or, whatever the symptom might be. And if we start to look back, it's like, wow, maybe your grandparents or your history of people were navigating this or going through this challenge, and you're finally able to break that cycle.
Yeah. I think personally for me, I noticed this through like my own work, something that I love to sing. Yeah. That's like a passion of mine. And I also like to talk, but like, I noticed that for me, a lot of my work has been to use my voice, whether it's through singing or speaking. Mm-hmm. There's a message that I have to use my voice, but it's uncomfortable sometimes. I grew up speaking Spanish. That was my first language until I started going to school. And oftentimes when I was younger, there was like this complex about like speaking, and do I sound the same as everybody else? Mm-hmm. Do I sound different? When I would meet people, sometimes they'll ask like, oh, where are you from? Like I can hear an accent, Mm-hmm. And so that like stayed with me. But when I was doing my deep work, a message that came to mind was that I am breaking generational patterns, that my lineage, and it makes sense, like my lineage may not have been able to utilize their voice fully. They were like held back, restricted. And it's part of the healing journey to break that pattern and to use my voice to speak up, even when it feels uncomfortable. And that would make sense because like, coming from another country to this country and not being able to communicate and being in an entirely different world, I could only imagine what they had to go through. They didn't have the education, they didn't have the resources. So it was really, it's almost like, being on that survival mode. And it's difficult to fully express oneself when you're just trying to do and get by. Absolutely. So I think that's like one way that I've noticed it even manifest in me, like breaking patterns of holding back, feeling restricted, and closing up.
Absolutely.
So maybe we can talk about that in terms of generational patterns, how it can affect people's belief systems, feelings of self-worth, just programming in general. What have you noticed in terms of that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so much to unlearn if you want to show up healthy and leave the dysfunction behind, because that dysfunction maybe was keeping, as a family unit, them safe, but it's no longer serving you. I think of two of my own family and lineage, and with my husband's too. So he's Persian from Iran, and his parents and grandparents had to flee in the with the Shah and the revolution. And so they came here to America with nothing. And they, even stories of one of his grandmas had to leave through the mountains overnight on camels. And then I think of with my history, we're Jewish, and my grandparents and or great grandparents came from Russia and Germany. And it was during the time, it was pre-Nazi times, but it was with the Cossacks and all the just anti-Semitism. And so they came here, and it's this fear, because I see it in his family and in mine. It's this anxiety, this neuroticism. It's this feeling of I'm not safe. And so maybe it's stocking up on food. Like all of our families, they always have so much food, and, they're just storing and preparing. And I think it's these subconscious views too of we're not safe. And it's just, how do you keep safety? And so really, how do you create safety not only within, but in your home, in your community, in this place in Los Angeles, for example, that we are safe.
And it's like sometimes that's even hard to stick with because of what we see in the news and things like that. But that means we have to be intentional about what we allow in, right? Completely. Filtering some stuff too, because it can activate stuff that we're like already working on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, social media and the news is so toxic.
It's so overwhelming sometimes. It's crazy. I definitely think something I've noticed is like, the more peace we want, the more we really have to filter all that stuff out. And we're becoming so addicted to that, that it's just like an internal struggle. So how do we approach trauma through a holistic lens?
That is the question, because trauma is stored in the emotional part of the brain. And so to access that, you access it through the nervous system and through the body. And so if you're not addressing that, then of course nothing's changing. And a lot of times people can come in saying, I do all the things. I go to yoga and I breathe and I journal and all these things, but I'm still not feeling better. And I think it's okay, but are we connecting the dots, and how are we doing it? Are you meditating in the traditional way where maybe you're forced to sit a certain way and think of nothing, and you have to be silent, as an example? Well, we find from a trauma-informed lens that that's actually not supportive, and that can be really re-traumatizing and re-triggering. And so how can you do it in a way where you're honoring your choices, you're finding what works for you and your body? Because a yoga pose that may feel good for someone else may not feel good for you. And so it's offering options and supports, and it's using an empowerment-based language as well in how you teach these classes. And so those are just some examples of how maybe you've tried holistic stuff and you feel like it didn't really resonate. Well, it could be because it's not taught in the trauma-informed approach. And so really the way I do it with clients is really through that lens and helping them be their own guru. So they're not looking to someone else to heal them. They get to do that healing work within, and really teaching them all the choices and options that they have to feel supported in their body.
You said something that's really important. So I kind of want to emphasize that we have a responsibility to ourselves to seek out trauma-informed care if you're dealing with trauma, but also this idea of empowering oneself to be one's own guru. Yeah. I love that. I love that idea that we can do that. We should do that. We have that responsibility to ourselves. For those that don't know, I went through a really traumatic experience in 2015 where I lost a loved one to suicide. And that really shifted my world, my perspective of life and God and everything. It made me question everything. And I was going to therapy and it was helping. But like you mentioned before, I had this realization that it wasn't enough. So I started searching for what more. I grew up religious, believing in God and all that. But I also felt like I was angry at God, actually. I was like, what kind of a God would allow this to happen? Like, this isn't even okay. This person was a wonderful person. Like, why would it happen to this person? But what happened for me is that I went through like a dip of like not believing, not caring, being angry, disillusioned, all of these things. But at some point I was like, okay, I have a choice now. Like, is this going to be my reality? Is this going to be my life? And I stayed there for a while. But then I decided to be like, there's got to be something more. I just can't accept this. And then it forced me to seek out different healing modalities. And that's part of almost like what I consider my awakening. I was searching for more, and I feel like the universe then started presenting all of these different things like breath work, sound healing, Reiki, all of these things that I didn't know about before. And with all of these different modalities, it allowed a deeper connection to myself, which then allowed for a deeper connection to my higher source, which then allowed for more understanding and meaning and purpose behind everything that happened. And it almost helped me consolidate the experience in a more positive way. Not that what happened was positive at all, but it gave it like assigned meaning to it, right? So I think that's the beauty of holistic healing, is that it's not just one approach. It's not just dealing with the mind, but like experiencing different modalities that then allow you to experience different things and different consciousness even, right? Different levels of consciousness, which then bring different wisdom and understanding.
And I love how you talked about the spirituality part, because energy work and spiritual psychology is so important. And so you think of it's mind, body, and spirit. And so really a lot of times people can come in where maybe they don't have a belief in God or universe, or maybe they have anger at God, or maybe it's they grew up with a really bad experience. They grew up in a cult or whatever it might have been. And so they have a lot of trauma with religion. And so that's also, it's exploring how do we unlearn maybe what we grew up with and really find what feels authentic. And especially, I use the word God as well, because that's my belief system. But I know for listeners, if you don't believe in God, that's totally okay. It's more just honoring what feels right, the language. Some people prefer source or universe, but for me, I grew up too in a home that was anti-religion and very atheist. And so actually it wasn't until about maybe 5-6 years ago that I started my journey into my own spirituality. And I found that through a connection with God and really understanding of us as one people, one universe, and that life force, and connecting with the energy we all carry, it really was that game changer as well of having hope. And I think we all need something bigger than ourselves to believe in, to connect to. Otherwise, it was so depressing having no belief system, because I felt like everything's random and it's hopeless and it's pointless and bad things happen to good people and it doesn't make sense. And now I can look at it through a different lens of, wow, you know what? God's unknowable, and I don't know why bad things happen to good people, but I do know that ultimately everything is for our good. And it's hard. It takes a long time to get to that point, right? And so if you're going through trauma now, it doesn't mean that this is a good experience, but it's more knowing that through healing and through radical acceptance, maybe your perspective will shift in the sense of, I'm going through something really hard right now, but I'm going to be stronger.
When you're in it, it's like, don't force it. Don't force trying to give it meaning or purpose or anything. It's going to happen throughout the healing. So it's okay to stay in that space and feel it, grieve whatever happened, be angry, be mad. All of that is part of the phase of healing, right? Or all the phases of healing and grieving.
Yeah. And never knowing, like, you'll never have the answer for why it happened, and honoring that that's okay.
Yeah.
We'll never get that answer, at least in this world, in this time.
And for some of us that are, I almost want to say either blessed or lucky, and we get to the other side, there is a different understanding where almost honestly like an appreciation, like, wow, if that didn't happen, it wouldn't have catapulted all of these other things, and I wouldn't have arrived here. I don't even know who I would be if certain experiences that were challenging hadn't happened. It's like they were necessary for my journey in some way. Oftentimes suffering makes us, like, it brings in the most wisdom, right? Suffering and challenges, that's when we learn the most. So as we're talking about this though, different healing modalities, I know you're a Reiki master, so maybe we can talk about what that is and how that helps people.
Yeah, so Reiki is an interesting one, because especially people who aren't familiar with energy work, or even, I'm so much in both worlds of I'm all about that evidence-based work and the spiritual stuff and faith and energy. We can't see it, but you can feel it. And even now, if you're listening, I invite you to do this practice to kind of connect with your energy, is where you rub your palms together. And then after rubbing it for a little bit, if you pull it apart and move it back and forth, and maybe you have to keep rubbing it, you're going to feel something. And that's your energy. That's your life force. And so Reiki really addresses that. It's a Japanese form, and it really helps with stress reduction and relaxation. But it's all about channeling are things stuck for you? Are you carrying a lot of stuff in your body? And so there's a couple ways you can do it. You can do it through hands-on, through touch, through a Reiki practitioner, putting hands on your body and channeling the energy to really help move things through. Or you can do it through distance as well, through no hands. And so it's nice that way. It can be very trauma-informed. And I think some people too think, well, is it through a religion or that? It's non-denominational. It's just literally working with that, your energy, your chi, your life force, which we all have.
I'm always curious, in terms of a practitioner, what is the experience for you? Are you channeling an energy? Like, how does that work? I've experienced Reiki as a recipient, and it's beautiful. For me, it's like an energetic massage. Yeah. How I feel when I leave, when I get a massage is how I feel when I get Reiki, but like times 10. And it also helps create distance between stressors and myself. I almost feel like I go above a realm, so that energetically now when I know things are happening or see the stressors in my life occurring, I feel like I'm looking down at them and they're not affecting me in the same way. So I can tell when I need Reiki because my body, like I feel more tension, more anxiety, and then I get Reiki and then I'm like, okay, wow, I feel better. But for you on the other side, as a practitioner, what is it that you do?
Yeah, so I'm channeling the energy from, for me, it's from God, but for other people, they might say life force or universe. Really, it's just you're channeling energy through you. And so through my hands, it's just flowing through. And then you just move it on the parts that you feel intuition-wise. You kind of can tell what's more stuck or not when you're scanning the body. And then you're really flowing that energy to just kind of push it out or move it through, release it. And it's really amazing. I love how you said a spiritual massage because it's so true. It really feels like that.
Yes. It's amazing. I love it. If you guys haven't tried it, you have to try it.
Yeah. And so many things happen from it. You can have tears come. You can maybe people who have had loved ones pass, sometimes they'll come to them in those moments. And it's just a very, not only, your body's there, your spirit's there, and you're really connecting on so many levels, really dropping in deep to what's going on. Sometimes people get downloads of things, of ideas, or really finding, oh, this is what I need to do in my life now. This is my purpose. Or they're releasing stress or sexual trauma or things that they've been carrying. And so I don't like to say that, oh, go to Reiki and it heals everything. It's more, this is one more modality that can just help facilitate this type of healing work.
Yes. And I almost see this helpful for people that are not ready to speak, that are not ready to dive deeper into things, but still need some relief, right? Because you don't have to talk. You don't even have to be touched. You just lie there and allow somebody to provide some support and some healing. It's pretty beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the benefit too of EMDR is that you actually don't have to say the trauma narrative. You can just say certain things that elicit it. So we'll create a target name and maybe I'll be checking in just for a few words, but I'm never asking necessarily unless you want to share the actual details of what happened. It's more you're sitting back, allowing your brain to play the memory and the bilaterals are going on. And that can be really helpful because traditionally with trauma work, we thought we had to just desensitize the narrative by talking about it. And while that could be helpful for some people, a lot of times that just activates it even worse.
Okay, I think this is an important question. What would you say to somebody who feels disconnected from their body and all of this just seems a little bit out of reach?
I want to really validate that because it makes sense with the disassociation. That has been your way to survive. And maybe you've naturally been numb to things. Maybe substances were involved. Maybe it's through work. There's so many ways that you can numb your feelings and avoid them. And so really, if you can explore, are there moments where you can start to slow down and ask yourself, especially if you're feeling anxiety, for example, okay, let me pause, take a breath, and can I scan my body and notice where am I feeling it in my body right now? And so you're really starting to tap in and you may not feel it. You may not feel anything, but maybe try doing a breathwork class or trying some yoga postures. And there's a lot of amazing free resources online, but starting small of noticing what's coming up for you and where do you feel it in your body so you can start to build that connection and really being able to integrate everything within.
Well, I loved our conversation. I feel like you have so much wisdom and knowledge, and you're so well versed in this topic. I'd love to have you back because I feel like there's just so much more to cover. But in the meantime, what do you have coming up? What are you working on?
Yeah, so you can find me online. I'm on Instagram as the Holistic EMDR Therapist, and I have a website. You're more than welcome to check that out, and you can join my email listserv. I'm putting together a mailer, finally getting to that, and then I'm in private practice here, so if anyone wants to inquire for therapy or for any of the holistic modalities, I really do it all in one, so it's not like you're coming just for EMDR or just for sound baths. You can come for all of it for sessions.
What's your website?
So it's the sanctuarywestlake.com.
Love it. Yeah. That's beautiful. And we're doing an event together.
Yes, exactly.
And do you want to share a little bit about what we're planning on doing?
Yeah, we're so excited. So we get to collaborate both of our loves for breath work and sound baths and mindfulness and trauma-informed yoga and discussing it and journaling and writing and releasing. And so really being able to bring together a beautiful group of people to not only come and feel stuff, but to release it and to honor whatever's showing up for them. And we paired it with the new moon or the full moon. So a lot of good energy in that time.
Some heart-opening cacao too.
Yes. So we hope you can join us for that.
Yes. We're so excited. So we're hoping to see some of you there. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and giving us so many great insights. I feel like there are some great takeaways here. Do you have any last thoughts, any journaling prompts, anything that you'd love to leave our guests with?
Absolutely. You know, something we didn't have time to get to was inner child work.
Yes.
And that's so important with trauma work because a lot of things that happened in the past, it's not you as the adult, the healthy, healed adult showing up. It's that hurt inner child at whatever phase and stage was left or was hurt. And it might be many showing up. So it's, can you start to even honor them, identify them? Journaling is a great way to ask, you know, what are you feeling when you think of talking to your inner child? How can I support you? And really allowing to nurture them. I love you. I'm here for you. You're safe with me. I'm going to take care of you.
I love that. Well, we'll leave everybody here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you again. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for having me. So great to be here.
Yes, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on the Moon Collective Sanctuary. Remember, your journey to a more fulfilling and empowered life continues beyond this episode. Until next time, may you remember who you are and stay open to embrace all that life has to offer. Ready to dive deeper into your journey of self-discovery? Join us for a transformative retreat at the Moon Collective Sanctuary. Visit mooncollectivesanctuary.com to learn more and book your spot.